Hello, welcome to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I want to talk about all things spooky. If you couldn't guess from my tiny Mia and my tiny coffin, I'm very excited about Halloween this year. I really enjoy Halloween, but I do not enjoy being scared. And that might seem like a bit of an odd thing to say, but as I talked about in my chatty Halloween crafty video where I painted this, I like the atmosphere of Halloween. I like the kind of like eerie, I suppose is the right word. But I don't like jump scares, I don't like horror films, I don't like, I used to not be able to watch Doctor Who because I get too freaked out by it, all of that stuff. I like describing it as I like to be spooked but not scared, I guess is the best way I can think to put it. And if that's you as well, stick around because I've picked out 10 of my books that I think would make really, really good Halloween reading. I'm going to start with what's probably the least spooky book on this list. This is Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, and if you've already read Neverwhere and you're watching this video, you might right now be clicking away thinking, what is this woman talking about? Neverwhere is nowhere near spooky. I politely disagree with you. I think Neverwhere is a really good book for this time of year. If you haven't heard of Neverwhere, essentially it's a book by Neil Gaiman. There's also a television series which is beautifully weird and bad looking but really good story. Neverwhere is about a man called Richard who ends up helping who he believes to be a homeless woman and ends up in an alternate London, or it's not even a parallel London, it's a London that exists at the same time as London, the real London, but everything is a bit weird. So, for example, Earl's Court, the train station, has a train that goes around with an Earl's Court on it. It's that kind of vibe. But I think this book has some really, really good atmospheric, spooky moments. For a start, most of this takes place underground, which adds to that kind of like dark, spooky. There's also a beast. There's this kind of constant threat of the beast. That's done really well in the television series. You never quite know who to trust in this book. You never really know what's going on, but it's just beautifully written. It's funny at times, it's spooky at times, it doesn't know what it is, and that's one of the best things about this book, is it kind of defies being put into a box. I really like this book. If you're looking for something to read that has that kind of longest night of the year, gotta make it through to the light at the end of the tunnel kind of feeling, this is definitely a good book to read. And if you haven't already read Neverwhere anyway, you should add it to your TBR because it's one of my favourite books. We in fact own it twice. We also own this edition, which I think is much nicer looking. This is a little bit swampy. But yes, Neverwhere. Next up is the first of 2 books by this author. This is Frances Hardinge's The Lie Tree. This one cost a Book of the Year in 2015, and this is not a sticker. It's the most frustrating thing. But this book is very good. If you want that spooky atmospheric feel, which I feel like I'm going to say a billion times in this video, so I apologise in advance, The Lie Tree is the way to go. The Lie Tree is all about a young girl whose name I've forgotten, Faith, there you go, Faith, who is somewhat investigating the death of her father, and in the process discovers the Lie Tree. I won't go into it in too much more detail because you have to discover this book for yourself. It's so beautifully written, it's so scary at times, but in that kind of creepy, ooh, what's going to happen kind of way. It's gothic, it's not violent for the most part, and it's really, really well done. I love this book. I need to reread this book. Would recommend The Lie Tree. Book 3 is also by Frances Hardinge. This is Skin Full of Shadows. This one I would say is possibly softer at times than The Lie Tree, but also probably more Halloween appropriate because it has ghosts. This is the story of 12-year-old Makepeace, so she has kind of a Puritan name, who is possessed by ghosts. So there's the ghost of the bear that she kind of has in her body, I guess. This is another beautifully written book. If you want atmosphere, read Frances Hardinge. If you want to not be terrified but be thoroughly spooked, read Frances Hardinge. If you want stories that leave you kind of reeling from like, how did she come up with that? Frances Hardinge, it's so good. And I will also show you, the hardback has this beautiful like spot UV gloss. There we go, spot UV gloss. Another thing, I read this a couple of years ago and I really need to reread it because it's just been sat on my shelf. Perfect Halloween reading, perfect. Next up is another bit of an outlier, a bit like Neverwhere. This is Circe by Madeline Miller. I haven't read her first book, The Song of Achilles, but I have read this. I've mostly got this on the list because I thought, what if someone's looking for a witch book that isn't cackling tiny hats? So this is kind of a prequel into the story of the Odyssey, but surrounding the witch Circe, who, if you haven't already read the Odyssey or looked up the story of the Odyssey, I recommend it. It's a good story. Don't bother with the Iliad. Iliad's boring. Odyssey is good. But yes, Madeline Miller kind of reclaims her story, and yeah, it's a witchy book that is not witchy in what you would imagine as a traditional sense, and that's why I put this on here. It's also bright orange, which felt Halloween appropriate, I guess. So probably another one of the outliers of this list, but if you want a different take on witches, this is what I would go for. Book 5, we have V.E. Schwab's City of Ghosts. This is V.E. Schwab's first, I believe, middle grade novel. This came out last year. I think the sequel, Tunnel of Bones, is out now. But this is a lovely ghost story, middle grade ghost story set in Edinburgh. You can really tell that V. Schwab absolutely loves Edinburgh. So if you are interested in finding out more about the city, this is a good book for that. But also it's got a really lovely main character. There's a cat, there are ghosts. It's good fun if you're looking for something very, very middle grade. But also a little bit spooky. Next up is a book that I read in October of last year for my Halloween reading. This is The Lantern's Ember. I don't own this. I had this from NetGalley. It was sent to me by the publisher. Obviously, that doesn't affect my opinion. So this is what I would think of as kind of like my most Halloween-themed Halloween read. Now, in this book you follow Jack, who is a lantern. Already getting the vibe. Jack, who's a lantern, so he guards entrances to the spirit world, kind of the devil's world. Jack made a deal with the devil, basically. And then Ember, who is the other character, is a witch. And they kind of, it's sort of like they go to Halloween Town, except Halloween Town is not like ha 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 ha, but more kind of like actually a bit spooky and scary. This is YA, but mostly it just made me laugh finding all the Halloween references in this, and I think it's good fun. And if you're looking for like, I need the most Halloween book I can possibly find, this would be where I would go. Book 7 is the book I read on Halloween night last year. That is Kirsten White's The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein. I adore this book. I think it's beautiful. I have not read Frankenstein before, and I will come out and say that. So I had really no background knowledge to the character of Elizabeth as she is in the novel Frankenstein. But this follows that character. If you know Frankenstein, you'll know. If you don't know Frankenstein, you don't need to know Frankenstein beyond the broad strokes of the story to read this. But this is a really good way of writing a side character as a main character, and also what I love about this book is that it's never clear how complicit Elizabeth is in what Victor Frankenstein ends up doing. It's really, really well written. It's beautifully written, as all Kirsten White books are. But yes, love this book. Ideal for reading on a Halloween evening because it's not too scary. It's not lock the doors, hide under your covers scary. It's just good writing. Next up, I have a couple of books that aren't here with me. So book 8 is The Gutter Prayer by Gareth Ryder Hanrahan. This came out earlier this year. This is on this list because while it's not like a Halloween horror, it has some really scary kind of world building within it. So there are the Lantern Men. Are they called the Lantern Men? Oh, I can't remember now. Tallow Men, I think. I read this a long time ago, and I set this list up this morning. I think they were called the Tallow Men, who are like evil creatures made out of wax. They were really creepy. There were people who were entirely made out of worms, and you just follow these characters in this world. And if you're looking for a fantasy novel that is scary, I'd probably go so far as to say bits of this are scary, but because it's not the main plot of the story, the main plot surrounds these 3 characters. Yeah, Carrie, Rat and Spa. It's just really atmospheric. It's really, really good. I'm very excited for the next book in this series. I should say Gutter Prayer was also sent to me by a publisher. It doesn't affect my opinion. Disclaimers, woohoo! Next up is another book that I don't have because it's currently lent out. This is another Kirsten White book, and this is Slayer, which is obviously her book set in the Buffy the Vampire universe. The next book, Chosen, comes out fairly soon, and I should pre-order it. But yes, essentially, I feel like Buffy is kind of the ultimate campy Halloween time nostalgia vehicle, and this book is probably less so that I think because she had to cram so much Buffy lore into it in order to make people understand what was happening, but I fully expected to get much campier as the books go on. This, you don't have to have seen Buffy to read. As I say, she puts all the information in there. I personally read it having watched enough Buffy to know what was happening, but certainly not an expert. And yeah, I thought it was really good. I think it's really good fun, and if you want vampires and like kicking butt, then that's the way to go. Book 10, I have Sarah Maria Griffin's Other Words for Smoke. Do not be deceived by these hot pink sprayed edges. Do not be deceived by this like rose gold foiling. This is one of the creepiest books I've ever read, and it's just weird. So I read Spare and Found Parts, which was her first book, which is interesting given that we've brought up Frankenstein. It's kind of Frankenstein inspired. I didn't care for it. I didn't think it was very good. It went a bit too literary fiction, if you know what I mean. But this book knocked my socks off. It's so weird, but weird in kind of the best way. You've got like a creepy owl thing that lives in the wall and eats bones. It's also gay, which is really nice. But yeah, just if you want a book that will make you kind of end the book thinking, what did I just read and why is it still sticking with me? I don't know what's happening. Other Words for Smoke, really, really good example. My bonus book on this list, you might look at the pile that I've already shown and think, Judith, I don't know, I don't really care. I really like horror, I want to read more of it, but I really want to read more horror by women. Then this is my suggestion. This is Monster, She Wrote. This was sent to me by Quirk Books. This is already out in the UK, I think. September 17th, yes. So this is already out. This is a proof copy. I think it's out in hardback at the moment. I'm not 100% sure. This is a non-fiction book all about the women who have been writing horror and speculative fiction. This goes all the way from kind of the 1600s through to looking at what the future of speculative fiction would look like. It is very horror focused, which is fine and appropriate for this time of year. I'd love a version of this that is all about the women who've written fantasy over the years. I think that would be really cool. I think there would be a lot of overlap at the beginning, but where it kind of starts to branch out, that would really interest me. Yes, I'll have more to talk about this book in my October wrap-up because I've only just finished it. But if you are looking to learn more about some amazing women writing in sometimes very extreme circumstances, I think this is a really good example. It's very Western-centred, which I think is kind of a product of A, it being written for an English and American audience, and B, because fiction has been very racist for quite a long time. So it's very Western-focused. They do acknowledge that. I think that was really good. It's also illustrated. There's little illustrations. It includes quotes. It includes, what I really like about this is it includes what you should read from the author that they're talking about, because they're said in the little biographies, what you should read from the author they're talking about, what else you might like to read of them, and then kind of a bonus, these authors have been compared to this author, maybe you want to read a graphic novel, maybe this film is very good, you know, it's just really well done. It's really easy to read, it's really well put together, it's funny, would recommend if you're looking for something to learn and maybe expand your reading list. So those are my 11 picks for my Halloween themed reading that I think that everyone should do, because why not? Every single person should read these books. No. Maybe pick a couple, let me know what you think. Have you read any of these? Let me know in the comments below. And as ever, you can support my book reading journey by sharing, by commenting, by liking, mostly by subscribing. That really helps me out. You can also follow me on all of my socials, and I will see you in the next one.